The lecture hall was bright with white lights that hummed softly above the rows of alien students who filled every seat and watched the tall figure at the front of the room speak. With slow confidence, the alien lecturer was old, his skin a pale shade of green, and his eyes narrow and sharp. Like polished stones, his voice was smooth, but carried the weight of certainty, as if every word he spoke was carved into truth itself. He was speaking about the limits of speed in space, about how nothing in the known galaxy could travel faster than light, and how all attempts to break this limit had failed for centuries. He held up a glowing diagram that floated in the air, a swirling image of space bent around a bright star, and he smiled as he explained how the laws of physics could not be broken, no matter how much one wished it. He called the dream of faster-than-light travel a child's story, something to tell younglings at night before they went to sleep. His words made many of the alien students laugh softly, their eyes filled with the comfort of hearing what they already believed to be true. At the back of the hall sat Yarrick, the only human in the class. His hands were folded on the desk, and his gaze was steady. He had heard such words before, not only from this lecturer, but from others across the academy. Always the same tone, always the same quiet dismissal of human ambition. The lecturer glanced toward him, his smile thin as paper, and then his voice took on a sharper edge. "You humans," he said, "are clever with small machines, but you do not understand the vast truths of the cosmos. You tinker, you guess, you dream, but dreams do not make engines that can tear the very fabric of space." His eyes glimmered as the alien students chuckled, some turning to see how the human would react. Yarrick did not answer. He simply reached into his bag and took out a worn notebook, its cover marked with burns and stains from years of use. He opened it slowly, as if the noise of the turning page was the only sound in the room. He began to write short lines, tight shapes, quick numbers. The lecturer's voice droned on about the futility of breaking the light barrier, about the failed attempts of countless species across time. The alien professor paced the stage, his hands moving in wide arcs as he painted pictures in the air of shattered ships, of engines that collapsed into themselves, of explorers who had tried and never returned. Every failed experiment was a stone laid upon the foundation of his claim, and with every stone he grew taller in the eyes of the audience. Finally he stopped and faced the human, his voice now low, but cutting the way a blade cuts silk. "You may be new to our ways, Yarrick, but here in this hall we do not chase impossible shadows. We seek what can be built and what can last. We do not waste time on ideas that belong in myths." He let the words linger, then smiled again, knowing the weight they carried in front of so many witnesses. There was a silence. Yarrick closed his notebook without a word. He slid it back into his bag, his movements calm, and without any rush he stood, and the sound of his chair sliding back echoed across the polished floor. Every eye in the hall followed him as he walked toward the exit. The alien lecturer watched him go, a faint glimmer of victory in his gaze. At the doorway Yarrick paused. He did not turn his head, but his voice carried across the room, clear and steady. "I will see you tomorrow." He said the words were simple, but they fell like stones into still water, sending ripples of confusion across the faces of the alien students. Some frowned, others smirked, as if he was making a fool of himself. The lecturer raised an eyebrow, his expression caught between curiosity and contempt, but he said nothing. Instead, he turned back to the board to continue the lesson, as if the human's quiet words meant nothing at all. Yarrick stepped into the corridor, his footsteps fading into the distance, the sound of the lecture hall returning to normal behind him, but in his mind the words of the lecturer still echoed, not as a weight to bear, but as fuel to burn. The hallway lights flickered once as he passed the cold air of the academy, wrapping around him like a challenge waiting to be met. In the hall behind him the lecturer spoke again about the beauty of the laws of the universe, and how nothing could be faster than light. The alien students listened, their faces calm, and certain none of them could imagine that, by the time the next morning came, those words would be broken forever. The night spread its long quiet hands across the city, lights fading into the cold sky, as Yarrick walked with measured steps, his boots tapping on the empty stone path that led away from the academy. The tall towers of alien architecture glowed faintly behind him, their blue and silver shapes reflecting the dim light of twin moons overhead. He carried no case, no heavy pack, only the same worn bag slung over his shoulder, yet there was something in his pace that spoke of purpose, something in the way he moved, as if he could already see the shape of the future. The workshop was far from the main district, hidden in the lower levels, Where few ever walked the doors here were old metal frames, scarred with years of work, and the air smelled faintly of oil and ozone. Yarrick pushed open a door with a faint creak and stepped inside. The light flickered once before settling into a steady pale glow, casting long shadows across the cluttered room. Tools hung from the walls in uneven rows, each one worn from used scraps of metal, and wiring covered the benches. Piles of half-finished devices rested in corners, like forgotten experiments. The air was cool and dry, but heavy with the memory of many long nights spent in this place. A small spherical machine no larger than a melon hovered near the far wall, its single lens glowing faintly blue. This was the AI assistant Yarrick had built himself years ago, before he even arrived at the academy. It floated toward him with a soft hum and spoke in a voice that was calm yet tinged with uncertainty. "You are here sooner than expected." Yarrick said nothing, only set his bag on the workbench and began to lay out its contents. Small coils of superconductive wire, thin sheets of alloy, fragments of old drive cores. The AI rotated slowly, scanning the items before speaking again. "The laws do not change," it said. "What you are trying contradicts them." Yarrick's hands did not stop moving. His fingers traced the edges of the alloy sheet, testing its weight, its balance. His eyes were sharp and fixed as he arranged the parts into a shape only he could see. He muttered equations under his breath, numbers that flowed like water, symbols that had no place in the standard teachings of the academy. The AI watched in silence, its lens shifting colors from blue to green to yellow as it tried to calculate his intent. The sound of a welder hissed through the air, sparks dancing in tiny arcs of orange light that faded before they touched the floor. The hum of the workshop grew deeper as Yarrick connected coil to frame to core, each movement precise and deliberate, like the turning of a key in a lock that had waited for centuries to be opened. Hours passed, though the moons outside had barely moved in the sky. His hands never slowed. The AI finally spoke again. "This design is unstable. If you activate it without full containment, the field collapse could destroy the building." Yarrick only adjusted a dial and replied, "Then I will make the containment strong enough." The AI hesitated, then asked why. In one night, Yarrick's gaze lifted from his work, his voice quiet but heavy. "Because," he said, "they think it cannot be done. They think humans cannot reach beyond the wall of light. I will show them." He tightened the final connection on the frame and stepped back, wiping the sweat from his brow. The machine before him was rough and uneven, its parts mismatched, but it pulsed with a faint glow from deep within, like the heartbeat of some living thing. Coils wound tightly around a central sphere that seemed to shimmer with a strange distortion. The air near it felt thicker, as if space itself was bending around it. The AI hovered closer, scanning the core, reading impossible fluctuations in the energy field. Its voice dropped to a low hum. "Yarrick, this is not just an engine. This is a hole in the world." Yarrick gave a faint smile and reached for another set of tools. "We have more work before it is ready." As he worked, the lights above flickered again, shadows stretching long across the walls. The AI detected small shifts in gravity. The metallic taste of charged particles filled the air, but Yarrick moved with steady hands, his mind locked on a vision that none of the alien professors would dare to imagine. He adjusted the resonators until the hum of the machine deepened, turning into a low rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat in the dark. In the quiet moments between each spark and hum, his thoughts returned to the lecture hall. The smirk on the alien lecturers faced the quiet laughter from the rows of students, the way they had looked at him, like a child pretending to play with tools. He felt the heat in his chest rise, but he did not let it break his calm. Instead, he poured it into each twist of wire, each calibrated turn of the frame, until the machine seemed to lean forward in readiness, as if it too could sense the challenge ahead. The AI broke the silence again, its tone now carrying something close to unease. "Containment reads at 90%, dropping slowly. Energy draw is increasing." Yarrick turned a small dial on the side of the core. The hum steadied containment back to stable levels. He said, without looking up. The AI hovered back, watching from a safe distance, its lens a single blue eye staring at the man who worked against the oldest wall in the known galaxy. From outside, faint footsteps passed along the corridor, someone walking the night routes of the lower levels. The AI dimmed its glow automatically, while Yarrick froze his hands over the machine, waiting. The steps faded, and he returned to work, the pulse of the core growing stronger, now filling the room like a quiet drumbeat. When the first sliver of morning light began to push through the narrow window, the machine stood complete, a rough creation of human hands surrounded by tools and scraps. The AI hovered closer, its sensors whispering of strange readings, ripples of distorted space, bleeding outward from the core. Jarek's eyes were tired, but his voice was calm as he said, "It will not just move faster than light, it will step around it." He reached out to place his palm on the surface of the frame. Feeling the vibration through his skin, the AI hesitated, then asked, "And if you are wrong?" Yarek looked toward the dim window, where the sky was changing from silver to pale gold. "Then I will try again, until I am not wrong," he said. The AI processed his words in silence, its lens pulsing faintly as it recorded every detail, every reading of the impossible engine. The machine's hum softened as Yarek powered it down, for now his eyes still fixed on it, as if afraid it would vanish if he looked away. He knew the next step would not be here in the shadows, but in the light of the lecture hall, where the ones who doubted him would have no choice but to see. The first light of morning slid slowly across the spires of the academy, painting the silver walls in shades of pale gold. The air carried the faint scent of rain from the night before, and the sound of distant transport ships moving toward the higher districts drifted in soft echoes through the streets. Inside the main dormitory building, the halls were already alive with quiet voices, students moving between rooms, carrying datapads and steaming cups of dark bitter drink, each group speaking in low tones as if guarding a secret. The rumors had begun before sunrise, spreading through the rooms like a current of electric charge. One alien student claimed he had been walking the lower levels late in the night and had seen light flickering through the window of the old workshop. Another swore she had heard the deep, steady hum of a power core unlike anything used in the academy engines, and that it had made the air tremble in her chest. A third insisted that Yarek, the lone human, had not left the workshop at all since the evening before, and that whatever he was building was still running when dawn touched the towers. In the common room near the center of the dorm, the voices tangled over one another. Some spoke with excitement, imagining strange machines that could bend the sky. Others spoke with ridicule, saying it was simply another human obsession doomed to collapse. Like so many past failures, the alien lecturer's name was mentioned more than once. Some saying he would crush whatever Yarek brought forward. Others saying he would not even bother to look. A tall, thin student with scales the color of burnished copper leaned against the wall, listening, his long fingers tapping lightly on the edge of his datapad. His name was Vecker, and he had a reputation for seeking trouble when it promised something new. He finally spoke, his voice slow and deliberate. "I saw him yesterday. He left the lecture hall with that look, the look someone has when they are about to break a rule that has never been broken before." Several heads turned toward him, and he let the silence stretch before speaking again. "I think he is going to try something dangerous." Across the room, a younger student shook her head, her pale skin almost silver in the morning light. "Humans dream big, but this academy teaches reality," she said. "You cannot go faster than light, and everyone knows that the laws are not made to be broken." Vecker only smiled thinly and pushed away from the wall, his voice dropping lower so that only those nearest could hear. "I am going to see for myself before the morning session starts," he said, his eyes glinting with curiosity. A few others exchanged uneasy glances, some eager to follow, and others wary of being caught outside the permitted zones before class. The corridors outside the dorm were quiet as Vecker made his way toward the lower levels, his footsteps soft on the polished floor. The air grew cooler as he descended, the light dimmer, the sound of the city above fading into a low hum. He reached the old workshop door and paused, pressing his ear to the cold metal. At first he heard nothing, but then there it was, a faint throb, a slow rhythm, like the distant beat of some giant heart. He stepped back, his own pulse quickening. He searched for a gap in the doorframe and found a narrow line where the light from inside leaked through. It was not the harsh white of standard lamps, but a shifting glow like sunlight through moving water. He leaned closer and peered through the gap. What he saw made his breath catch. The air inside shimmered, as if bending, the shapes of the tools and benches around the center of the room. The machine stood tall enough to reach Jarek's shoulder, its surface covered in coils that pulsed with soft waves of color. The core at its center burned with a light that was not steady, but alive, flowing and curling like smoke made of pure energy. Yarek stood beside it, his face calm, but his movements precise, as he adjusted the position of a small panel. Wires trailed from the machine to a cluster of instruments that blinked with readings too fast to follow. The human reached for a lever, and the machine's hum deepened, the shimmer in the air growing stronger, until Vecker felt his stomach twist, as if the space between him and the door had shifted ever so slightly. He stepped back quickly, his breath sharp in his throat, and turned to run, his mind racing with what he had just seen. By the time he reached the upper levels again, his story was already forming in his mouth, and when he stepped into the common room, the students turned to him like leaves turning toward the wind. "It's alive," he said. "The machine is alive." The words hit the room like a spark in dry grass. Voices rose, questions tangled over one another. "What do you mean alive? What did you see? How big is it? Did he speak to you? Did it move?" Vecker only shook his head, his eyes still wide, as if part of him was still standing at that workshop door. The details spilled out in fragments: the glow, the shimmer, the way the air itself seemed to bend, the deep sound that had felt like it was coming from under his skin. Some students listened with fascination, others with skepticism. One muttered that Vecker was just feeding the humans legend for the sake of attention, but even the doubters spoke more quietly than before. For the first time, there was a thread of uncertainty running through their words. In a corner near the window, an older student sent a quick, encrypted message from her datapad to someone outside the dorm, her eyes flicking toward the others. As she typed, when the message was sent, she closed the device and stared out across the towers toward the central lecture hall. She knew the alien professor would want to hear this. By the time the morning bell rang, the whispers had reached almost every corridor. Students walking toward class spoke of little else, some glancing toward the lower levels with curious eyes, a few even changing their route to pass near the workshop, though the door remained closed and the light inside hidden. Yarrick did not appear in the dining hall that morning, nor in the courtyard where students often gathered before lessons. It was as if he had vanished into the shadows of the academy. Only the hum in the air of the lower levels and the restless talk of those who had heard or seen signs of his work remained. In the grand lecture hall, the alien professor prepared his lesson, unaware of just how much his class would change before the day was done. He adjusted the floating diagrams above the stage, his mind still fixed on the certainty of the laws he had spent his life teaching. And though he noticed the odd energy among the students as they filed in, he assumed it was nothing more than the usual morning chatter. He could not know that in the depths of the academy a human had built something that no lecture, no law, no ancient theory could contain, and that before the next sun set, every student, every teacher, and perhaps every world in the network would know the truth. The workshop lay deep in the quiet lower levels, far from the daylight that now poured across the higher towers. Above, the air was cool and still, save for the faint hum of power lines buried in the walls and the occasional drip of condensation from old pipes. Yarrick stood before the machine, his hands resting lightly on the edge of the frame, his eyes fixed on the shimmering core. At its center, the coils wound tight around the sphere pulsed faintly like the heartbeat of some strange living creature waiting to be woken. The AI assistant floated nearby, its lens bright with an uneasy glow, reading streams of data from the machine, the numbers twisted in ways that made no sense to standard physics models. Every fraction of a second they shifted into patterns no simulation could predict. Yarrick adjusted the angle of a narrow stabilizer plate, and the hum of the frame shifted slightly deeper, more resonant, like the sound of a giant breathing in the dark. The AI's voice was quiet but carried a sharp-edge containment field, holding at 93%, but energy levels rising faster than expected. The human nodded once without looking away from the core, then reached for the lever that would feed the main power line into the system. The AI hovered closer, its voice more urgent. "If you start the sequence without final calibration, we may lose the frame." Yarrick's hand stayed steady as he replied, "Then we will build it stronger next time." He pulled the lever down in a single smooth motion. The lights in the workshop flickered, dimmed, then surged brighter. As the machine awoke, the hum deepened into a steady rhythm, a low vibration that rolled through the floor and into the walls. The coils glowed brighter, their colors shifting in slow waves of blue-green and gold. The core swelled with light that moved not outward, but inward, curling into itself like a whirlpool in deep water. Loose tools rattled on the benches. A stack of metal sheets slid slightly to one side as gravity itself seemed to bend for an instant. The AI's lens shifted rapidly between warning tones as it tried to interpret readings that refused to stay within known parameters. Yarrick stepped closer, his eyes narrowed on the way the light folded in the core. A faint ripple spread from the sphere outward across the frame, and then beyond it, passing through the air like the wake of an invisible wave. The AI registered the shift, its voice dropping to a low, almost reverent tone. "Space compression detected within local field." Yarrick did not answer. He only reached for the tuning dial on the side of the core, adjusting it by fractions of a degree. With each turn, the hum of the machine smoothed the light in the core, becoming more focused, less chaotic. Somewhere far above in the quiet corridors of the Academy, a security sensor flickered as the ripple passed, unnoticed by most, but logged by automated systems. In the workshop, the AI's voice returned to a sharper tone. Containment at 88%. Recommend stabilizing field. Yarrick kept adjusting the dial, his jaw tight, his eyes never leaving the shimmering sphere. The glow began to pulse faster, the air around the frame bending more visibly. Now the edges of the workbench nearest to it looked slightly warped, as if viewed through water. The AI shifted position, floating to the far side of the frame, to scan the distortion field, its lens catching strange flashes of light, invisible to human eyes. Yarrick's breathing slowed, each inhale and exhale timed to his adjustments, until the hum of the machine matched the rhythm of his own chest. Then, with a sudden deep thrum, the core's light surged. The coils flashed white for an instant, and the ripple burst outward again, stronger this time, rattling every loose object in the workshop. The AI sensors spiked alarms. Energy output has exceeded initial design parameters by 60%. Yarrick stepped back half a pace, studying the readings on a small side console. The numbers twisted wildly before settling into a narrow band far above what any known engine could sustain. The AI sounded almost uncertain as it said, "If this holds, you will have broken the barrier." The human's mouth curved faintly, but he did not speak. Instead, he reached for a thin cable coiled on the bench and clipped it into a small socket at the base of the frame, connecting the machine directly to a remote trigger switch. The AI hovered closer, scanning the link. Curious, Yarrick only said, "Tomorrow we take it upstairs." As if sensing its own role in what was to come, the machine's hum settled into a slow, steady beat, the shimmering in the air less chaotic, more like the controlled breathing of something alive. The AI dimmed its lens, slightly storing every detail of the sequence, the containment readings, the compression curves, the strange harmonic resonance in the coils. Yarrick moved around the frame, checking each connection, tightening each lock, as if preparing a craft for launch. Outside the workshop, the lower-level halls were empty, but not silent. Faint echoes of the hum carried through the old walls, barely audible, yet strange enough to make passing maintenance drones pause for a fraction of a second before continuing their route somewhere in the upper dorms. The talk had not stopped since Vecker's return, and now those who had doubted began to feel the weight of curiosity pulling them toward what the human was building. Yarrick powered the machine down slowly, the glow fading coil by coil, until only the faint inner shimmer of the core remained. The air seemed to relax, the objects on the benches settling back into place. As the subtle distortion faded, the AI ran a final scan and spoke with a calm finality, "All systems intact, no structural damage, energy pattern preserved in core memory." Yarrick gave a single nod, his gaze still fixed on the machine, as if unwilling to break the link between thought and creation. The moons outside had shifted higher in the sky, their pale light slipping through the narrow workshop window and catching on the edge of the frame, making the metal gleam softly in the dim air. Yarrick reached out and rested his hand on the side of the machine, the vibration still faint beneath the surface, like the lingering echo of a great voice. The AI hovered close and asked in a quiet tone, "What will you call it?" Yarrick did not answer at first. Then, with his eyes still on the core, he said, "Tomorrow. They will name it for me." The AI recorded the words, marking them alongside the final sequence logs as it drifted back toward the far wall, its lens dimming into standby mode. Yarrick remained standing there in the glow of the quiet machine, the weight of what he had built settling around him like the first breath of a storm not yet arrived. In the silence, only the faint hum remained, a reminder that the barrier every mind in the galaxy believed unbreakable had already begun to crack. The sun had climbed high above the spires of the Academy, its light striking the tall silver towers until they shone like spears of glass in the pale morning sky. The lecture hall was already filling with students, their voices low and full of an energy that had nothing to do with the day's lesson. The alien lecturer stood near the center stage, reviewing the floating diagrams before him, unaware of just how much the shape of the morning would change in the next few minutes. Yarrick walked slowly along the main corridor leading to the hall, each step measured, his worn bag resting against his side, his face calm, but his eyes holding a quiet fire that no one passing him could miss. The hum of distant engines filled the air from transport ships arriving and leaving the landing bays far above the ground. He stepped through the wide doorway into the lecture hall without a sound, Yet every conversation faltered the moment he entered. Dozens of eyes turned toward him, some curious, some skeptical, a few openly amused, as if waiting for him to make a mistake. The alien professor glanced up from his notes and arched one ridged brow, a faint smile crossing his lips, as if greeting a performer who had returned for the final act of a play. He had already lost Yarrick moved through the rows, without hurry, climbing the small steps to the platform at the front of the hall. He stopped only a pace away from the lecturer and placed a small metal sphere on the desk between them. It was no larger than a clenched fist, smooth and silver, with a faint line around its center that almost seemed to move. If one looked too long, the lecturer looked down at it, then up at Yarrick, his voice low and slightly mocking. "Is this the proof of your dream, human?" Yarrick's reply was calm. "One trip to the moon and back before your next sentence ends." The hall rippled with laughter from several students, a murmur of disbelief from others. The professor's smile widened as he straightened his back and looked around at the audience, then back at Yarrick. "I could stand here and speak for hours," he said. "What then would your little toy do?" Yarrick reached into his bag and drew out a narrow black control device, pressing his thumb to a small pad on its surface. Without hesitation, the sphere vanished in a sharp ripple of light, leaving only a faint distortion in the air where it had been. Gasps broke from the front rows, some students rising from their seats. The professor's eyes narrowed as he leaned forward, scanning the desk, as if expecting to see some hidden trick. Then, before anyone could speak, a second ripple shimmered through the air, and the sphere returned, landing gently in the exact place it had left its smooth surface, now dusted with a fine gray powder that clung to it in uneven streaks. The room fell silent, so silent that even the faint hum of the floating diagrams above the stage seemed loud. A student in the front row leaned forward, eyes wide, whispering something about lunar dust. Another began running a handheld scanner over the sphere, his expression shifting from doubt to shock as the readings appeared in the air for all nearby to see. Composition matches exactly with surface samples taken from the Mare Tranquillitatis. The lecturer's hands curled slowly on the edge of the desk, his gaze fixed on the human before him. "You could have faked this," he said, his voice sharp. Yarrick stepped closer, his own voice soft, but carrying across the silent hall. "That was the slow version." A ripple of unease moved through the crowd, some students leaning back in their seats, others whispering in urgent tones. The lecturer took a slow step back, his eyes flicking toward the audience, as if weighing how much of this moment he could control. Yarrick tapped the control device once more, and the sphere shimmered, vanishing again. This time the distortion in the air was sharper, the ripple passing through the floor and walls like a silent wave. Before anyone could fully react, the sphere reappeared once more. This time its surface was marked with a thin film of frost, small crystals forming along the seam. The alien professor stared at it, recognizing instantly the signature of deep space exposure, a journey not to the moon, but far beyond the safe corridors of the planetary system around them. Somewhere in the back of the hall, a voice whispered that no known vessel could have traveled that distance in such a short time. Another voice answered that no vessel had. Yarrick bent and picked up the sphere, holding it in his palm as he looked toward the audience, his tone even. "You were told nothing could move faster than light. You were told the laws cannot be broken." The AI assistant floated silently just behind him, its lens recording every word, every face, every reaction, its quiet hum lost beneath the growing noise of the crowd. Some students demanded to see the internal design. Others shouted for a demonstration under official conditions. A few simply stared, as if unable to decide whether they were watching history or deception. The lecturer raised a hand for silence, his gaze locked on Yarrick. "If what you claim is real," he said, "then this technology changes everything. It changes the way we trade, the way we fight, the way we govern our worlds." He stepped closer, his voice low enough that only Yarrick could hear. "Which means it is far too dangerous to leave in your hands alone." Yarrick's eyes narrowed, but he gave no answer. He only placed the sphere back on the desk and turned toward the hall, his voice lifting again. "Tomorrow you will see it again, but not here in the shadows, not hidden behind lectures and theories. Tomorrow it will run at full power." The crowd erupted into shouts and questions, the lecturer calling for order as Yarrick stepped down from the platform, his pace unhurried. Even as the room seemed to tilt with the weight of what had just happened, students pushed toward the front, trying to get a closer look at the sphere. Others ran for the exits, already sending messages across the academy to friends, to instructors, to anyone who would listen. In the corridor outside, Yarok walked with the same measured steps he had taken into the hall, the AI hovering at his shoulder, its lens glowing faintly. "You realize," it said, "that you have just drawn every eye in this place toward you." Jarek's reply was quiet. That was the point. Behind them in the lecture hall, the alien professor lifted the sphere in both hands, staring at the faint frost still clinging to its surface. The voices of the students swirled around him, but he heard none of them, only the echo of Jarek's words. That was the slow version, and the unspoken question of what the fast one would do. The next morning dawned clear and sharp, the twin suns climbing together over the edge of the horizon and bathing the academy in pale gold light that caught on the silver towers until they gleamed like spears thrust into the sky. The air was crisp with the faint scent of rain that had fallen during the night, and the open courtyard outside the grand testing chamber was already crowded with students, instructors, and officials, drawn by the whispers that had spread like fire through dry grass. Inside the chamber, the space was vast, a circular hall with walls of smooth metal and a ceiling so high the upper edges vanished into shadow. Bright lights lined the perimeter, casting sharp beams across the floor. In the center stood Jarek's machine, now fully assembled on a raised platform, its coils tightened and polished, its core a deep steady glow that seemed to draw the eye and hold it. The air around it shimmered faintly, bending the light in ways that made the edges of the platform look uncertain. The alien lecturer stood to one side, speaking quietly with two academy overseers, their long robes edged with the silver insignia of authority. His voice carried an edge of control, though his eyes kept flicking toward the machine, as if drawn by it. Despite himself, the overseers had come to judge the claim themselves, for if what the human said was true, the implications would shake the foundations of every system in the network. Yarok stepped into the chamber with the same measured pace he had carried the day before, the AI assistant hovering close, its lens bright with recording light. A small crowd of students followed him at a respectful distance, their whispers hushed in the echoing space. The human moved straight to the machine, his hands brushing across the frame, checking each connection with calm precision, as if there were no crowd, no officials, no tension building like a storm in the air. The lecturer called out, his voice echoing in the hall, "You will demonstrate under controlled observation, human. All readings will be recorded by independent monitors, and any irregularity will end the trial." Yarok gave a single nod, without looking up, his fingers tightening one last fastener before stepping back. He reached for the narrow control device clipped to his belt, and with a soft click the machine stirred to life. The hum began low and deep, vibrating through the floor and into the bones of everyone present. The coils lit with slow ripples of blue and green, then brighter gold. The shimmer in the air thickened, as if the space around the core was folding in on itself. The overseers exchanged quick glances, their handheld scanners already flashing streams of incomprehensible numbers. One of them whispered that the readings were unlike anything in recorded archives. Yarok spoke without raising his voice. "The target is the far edge of the Kuiper Belt. Outer system coordinates already locked." The lecturer scoffed audibly and said no vessel could reach that distance in less than weeks, even with the fastest slipstream engines. The human only pressed his thumb against the trigger, and the machine roared silently, its hum rising in pitch as the core flared with a light so bright it threw sharp shadows against the distant walls. In a breath, the small test capsule fixed to the machine's emission plate vanished, the ripple it left behind visible to the naked eye as it spread across the chamber's air. The crowd leaned forward, as if pulled by the movement, and then only moments later the ripple returned, carrying with it the capsule, now crusted in fine frost and speckled with flecks of metallic dust from objects that drifted in the dark reaches of space beyond any settled path. Gasps broke from the onlookers, the overseers rushing forward with scanners that confirmed the destination and return time. One of them shook his head in disbelief, the calculations showing travel at more than 100 times the speed of light. The lecturer's face had lost its confident curve, his eyes locked on the capsule, as if it were a shard of some ancient forbidden truth. Yarok did not pause. He keyed a new set of coordinates into the device and spoke again. "This time the target is Proxima Centauri." The crowd erupted in noise before he even touched the trigger, voices rising in disbelief, others shouting warnings that the attempt was impossible. The AI floated higher, its lens spinning rapidly to record every angle of the moment. Jarek's thumb pressed the pad, and the machine answered with a pulse so deep it seemed to come from beneath the floor. The core's light became a blinding flare, the ripple surging outward faster, sharper. In less than 3 seconds, the capsule reappeared, clanging softly against the plate where it had begun its surface, now streaked with crimson dust and faint traces of frozen gases unique to the Proxima system. The readings confirmed it within heartbeats. The chamber fell into a stunned silence, broken only by the faint hum still coming from the machine. The alien lecturer stepped forward, his hands trembling slightly as he reached toward the capsule, then stopped inches away, as if afraid it might vanish again. His voice was quieter, now almost hollow. How did you stabilize the field? No one has ever contained a singular compression long enough to bridge that distance. Jarek's eye stayed steady as he replied, you told me it could not be done, so I built it until it could. Murmurs swelled through the crowd, the overseers exchanging urgent words about containment protocols and interstellar trade implications. The AI quietly flagged the moment in its log, marking it as the primary breakthrough instance. Yarek powered the machine down slowly, the coils dimming, the shimmer in the air fading, until only the faint thrum in the core remained, like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. The lecturer stood motionless, his gaze drifting between the machine, the human, and the capsule, as if trying to decide which one was the true impossible thing here. When he finally spoke, his words carried less mockery than before and more of something like respect. You have done what no species has done before, and you did it in one night. Jarek's expression did not change, though his eyes softened slightly. This is only the beginning, he said, his voice steady. I built this for demonstration, but the real design is larger, faster, and it will not carry capsules, it will carry crews. The chamber was no longer just an audience. It was a wave of speculation, fear, excitement, and awe. Students clustered together, imagining travel without limits. Instructors whispered of the collapse of old trade routes. Overseers debated the control of something that could make or break the balance of power in the galaxy. The AI remained silent, but its lens stayed locked on the human, recording the moment for every future retelling. Above the noise, the alien lecturer stepped closer, lowering his voice so that only Yarek could hear. You understand that they will want to take it from you. Yarek looked back at him, unblinking. Then they will have to catch me first, he said. The testing chamber had emptied slowly after the demonstration, though the echoes of voices still seemed to linger in the vast space long after the crowd had gone. The overseers had left with hurried steps, carrying their data cores close to their chests. The alien lecturer remained for a time in the far corner, speaking in low tones to a select group before leaving through the high arched doors. Now the hall stood almost empty, save for Yarek, the AI assistant, and the machine that still pulsed faintly with the afterglow of its impossible work. Yarek moved with quiet precision as he rechecked the connections, his hands gliding over each surface with the ease of someone touching something they knew better than themselves. The AI hovered nearby, its lens tracking his movements and scanning for residual energy spikes. Readings show the core remains at 40% capacity, it said in a low voice. Yarek nodded without looking up, then reached to a small recessed panel at the base of the frame, pressing his palm against the cold metal until it clicked and slid open. Inside was a control cluster different from the rest, sleeker, newer, its surfaces unmarked by the hurried construction of the earlier parts. This was the piece he had worked on long before the challenge in the lecture hall, long before the rumors had started. The AI rotated slightly, scanning the unfamiliar design, and asked, what is this? Jarek's reply was calm. This is the part one did not show them. He began to adjust the controls within the hidden panel, and the hum of the machine deepened, shifting into a tone the AI had never recorded. The shimmer in the air returned, but now it was thicker, heavier, bending not just the light, but the sense of space itself. The coils brightened in slow waves, the cores glowed, darkening to a rich, deep gold, as if it were drawing in the very air around it. The AI's voice took on an edge. Yarek, the sequence does not match the test patterns. This will not send an object anywhere. Jarek's hands did not slow, his eyes fixed on the core. It will not send anything out, he said. It will bring something in. Beyond the chamber doors in the wide outer hall, a faint vibration could be felt through the floor. The few late students passing by paused, frowning, as the lights above them flickered and steadied. Inside the chamber, the shimmer expanded outward from the machine, the edges of the platform blurring until it looked as if the floor itself was folding away, revealing a depth that should not have existed. The AI's sensors spiked readings impossible to classify, gravity distortion exceeding safe levels, quantum variance rising. Yarrick stood still before the frame as the glow of the core sharpened into a single vertical plane. A surface of rippling light tall enough for a person to walk through it did not shine outward like ordinary illumination. Instead, it seemed to pull the eyes inward, as if behind that surface lay somewhere far older and far larger than the room around them. The AI drifted back slightly, its lens focusing on the new aperture. "This is a stable doorway," it said, the voice a mix of awe and alarm. Yarrick stepped closer, the light spilling over his face in soft gold and deep shadow. "This is not just faster than light," he said. "It is anywhere you can imagine." The air in the chamber felt charged, the faint hum of the city outside gone, replaced by the slow, heavy pulse of the machine beyond the surface of the doorway. Shapes flickered for an instant, a horizon under twin suns, a forest of crystal towers, a dark plain under a sky filled with swirling green clouds, each vision lasting less than a heartbeat before shifting again. The AI's lens clicked softly, capturing every image. Yarrick looked over his shoulder toward the empty doorway of the chamber, knowing the overseers would return soon, knowing the lecturer would come with them, and that they would demand control of what they now thought they understood. He turned back to the shimmering frame and stepped forward, the light curling around him, as if welcoming him home. The AI moved quickly to his side, its voice quieter than ever. "You may not come back," Yarrick smiled faintly. "Then they will have to follow me into places they cannot survive." He crossed the threshold in a single step, his form rippling in the light and vanishing beyond it. The AI hesitated only for a fraction of a second before following the surface of the doorway, folding around its small frame. Then it too was gone. For a long moment the chamber stood silent, save for the low pulse of the machine. The doorway still open, still shifting between landscapes, none of them belonging to the world outside. Then the sound of hurried footsteps came from the far hall, the overseers' voices sharp with urgency, the alien lecturer at their head, his eyes locking instantly on the frame. He stopped at the edge of the platform, the others crowding behind him, the shifting light reflecting in their faces. None of them spoke for a heartbeat. Then one of the overseers demanded to know where the human had gone. The lecturer's gaze did not move from the surface of the doorway. "He has not gone anywhere," he said. "He has gone everywhere." Even as he spoke, the shimmer of the surface deepened, a faint shadow forming within it, as if something on the other side was moving toward them. The hum of the machine grew louder, the edges of the light curling outward like fingers, pulling at the space around them. A strange wind stirred in the air of the chamber. Though no vent moved, the overseers stepped back. The lecturer did not. His eyes narrowed as the shape in the doorway became clearer. Not Yarrick, not the AI, but something taller, broader, its outline blurred in the shifting gold light. Whatever it was coming through the doorway, and it was coming fast. The lecturer's mouth tightened, and his hands curled slowly at his sides, knowing that whatever crossed that frame next would decide whether the galaxy had just been given its greatest gift or its deepest wound. The hum became a roar, though still without sound. The light flared once, and the shape stepped forward, its shadow spilling across the platform and onto the floor of the chamber. The door had opened, and it was not going to close again.